Hey, gorgeous! Welcome to the Business Mindset Podcast with Holly Wharton, which combines powerful strategies on how to upgrade your business mindset, along with practical business tips to grow your business. This podcast features solo shows with Holly and also interviews with inspiring women entrepreneurs from around the world. Thank you so much for joining us today. And now, here's your host, Holly Wharton.
Hello and welcome to the Business Mindset Podcast, episode 187. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm here with today's special guest, Maggie Patterson. Maggie is a communication strategist and chief marketing officer at Scoop Industries. With 15 plus years of experience, 11 of which as a self-employed consultant, Maggie has spent her entire career working in client-faced roles in marketing and as a copywriter. Today, she works with service-based business owners to help them implement smart strategies for business growth. And today, I'm so excited. We're going to be talking about how to build your business based on referrals and introductions, because this is something that Maggie is super expert in, because for the first 8 years of her business, she had no website and relied 100% on referrals. So that's so impressive. Welcome, Maggie.
Thank you so much, Holly. It's one of those things. I love to talk about referrals. When you said you wanted to talk about that, I was like, yes, let's do it.
Excellent. So why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about your background and your business journey and how you got to where you are today?
So I followed a pretty typical path, right? I did all the things you're supposed to do, but I was always I had that entrepreneurial spirit from a really young age. I started a business when I was 8 years old for wagon rides, and it was a wagon thrill ride. I would put kids in a wagon at the top of the hill in our neighborhood, and then I would push them down. Problem being, it was into semi-oncoming traffic, so it was shut down very quickly. My sister and I were put out of business, but I've always been that kid who was like trying to start things. So even when I went to college and then I went into a PR agency job, I always had in the back of my head, I was like, I'm going to do my own thing. And I just knew that was the way to go. And when I had my son 12 plus years ago, I took that as an opportunity when I went on maternity leave to say, okay, you know what, this is the natural time to make a leap. Because I had this feeling if I didn't do it then, when I had that natural break in the busyness, I was on such a career trajectory that I just wasn't going to stop. I mean, they were like, what do you mean you're going to quit? You're going to be VP soon. I'm like, no, not see ya. So I mean, I had to say no to some. I really loved my job. I loved my clients, but I knew there was something bigger and better for me. So then I, basically hung out my shingle, and because of referrals, because of having a really good network and cultivating strong relationships in my years as a professional, I was able to build a consulting business rather quickly without any fancy internet things to back me up.
Impressive. So how was it that you decided, did you just not even think about building a website because you were so busy with referral clients, or how did that happen?
It was so funny. Like, I'm given that my background is in marketing and communications, like I write website copy. I now work with designers every day on design. And like, it seems funny that I didn't do it, but the reality was I knew that my clients didn't need that piece of the marketing puzzle to trust me as an expert. I relied really, really heavily on LinkedIn as kind of my version of a website. And this is the thing. I think that time you could really get away with it. I think now we don't need as fancy of a website. Get started with a really simple, basic website that just kind of covers, ticks the boxes and says you exist on the internet, versus spending 6 months creating this master thing that it's like, you know what? You haven't even had a client yet. Slow your roll, people.
Yeah, I was just talking to a friend the other day who's actually an author, and I forget how much he said he spent on a website. Like, this is just a new author, basic website. It was like $25,000. And I was just like, what does your website do that you spend so much on it? Oh my God.
I'm like, hey, for $15.95, we could have got you started on Squarespace.
Yeah, it's amazing. So tell me about how you built this website based on referrals. So you obviously had clients that you've been working with over the years, people that knew you, you had, testimonials, you had people who were happy with your work. How was that transition from full-time employment to working freelance in your own business?
So this is honestly, I use the most basic thing. And what I love about this is that everyone can do this. Do really good work and protect your reputation. And from there, I mean, if you are a professional, it becomes very simple for you to let people know that you're starting to do your own thing. so many times I know I was guilty of this at different points. I see clients guilty of this. We think that we need something way fancier than an email. Sending an email to let people know that you're basically in business, working the contacts you already have. And we have so many more contacts than we realize. I think sometimes we're like, well, I've got 5 friends. It's like, no, but think of every old coworker, every old boss, the old VP of marketing. I went back to my college communications professor, which is actually where my first client came from because he recommended me. So, really having this broader view of like, who are all these people that already know, like, and trust you and that want to support you? And that's really, truly where your best clients are going to come from. And it's going to come a lot easier because you don't have to convince people in the same way.
I love that. And I think a lot of people really underestimate the power of reaching out to just normal people that you know. They don't have to be necessarily in your industry. They don't have to be, your ideal client yourself. They just need to know people who might be interested in working with you.
Exactly. And depending on what you do, like, it doesn't have to be like all the technical details. You don't have to drown people in it. It's like, hey, I'm doing X. If you know people or you can introduce me to people, I would love that. I will take care of the rest for you.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So how can people start getting referrals? Now, I know you said reach out to people that you know, but for people who might think, like, where do I start with this? Where do you start with this?
Okay, so the very first thing is to get really, really clear on what you're going to ask. So do you have a specific service you're looking for? Are you a new coach and you're looking for your first 3 or 4 coaching clients? We need to be really clear on what we're going to ask for before we reach out to anyone, because otherwise we're going to be a little bit discombobulated, and making that ask or, sharing that suggestion is going to feel super awkward. So getting really clear. The other thing I really encourage people to do is to literally sit down with a blank piece of paper and a pen and go systematically through, okay, these are all the people I know. And then from there, coming up with a hot list of, let's say, 5 to 10 people that you reach out to first that are going to be your biggest champions and your biggest supporters. And then from there, it's really a matter of just that kind of one-to-one outreach to people to say, hey, you know what? This is what I'm doing right now. Now, if you haven't talked to someone in a while, you're probably not going to open with an email that says, hey, can you give me a referral?
Yeah.
But, being a good steward of your relationships and keeping your network warm over time is always going to pay off, so that when you do want to say, hey, you know what, I have an opening for a client, that's when you can do it because it's organic and natural. The other thing is ultimately always looking back at your past clients. Happy past clients are always going to be willing to share you. You just need to let them know that you want to be shared. Sometimes clients think, oh, well, she's too busy. She doesn't need clients. And the reality is if your favorite client is going to bring you another client, that's a great kind of client for you to have. So you want that door to always be open.
And how do you recommend that people reach out to former clients and say, hey, do you recommend putting in a referral system or offering some kind of compensation, or just saying, hey, I'm looking for referrals? What's your best tip for that?
Yeah. And honestly, this is going to depend a lot in your industry. Like, for example, as a communications person, it's going to be really weird if I'm like, hey, I'm going to give you X or Y. Whereas I know in a lot of other industries, it's not uncommon for there to be an incentive attached to that. So you're going to have to kind of feel out what the norm is in your own industry and networks. But really, it comes down to this is, making sure you're delivering that person ongoing value, and then just saying, you know what, I really loved working with you. I have an opening for a client right now. If you know anyone that's a client or colleague that you could recommend, I'd be elated. Thank you. I'd be very grateful for it. Thank you so much. Like, it's really a simple ask. It doesn't have to be this big, long-winded detail thing. Plant the seed and you never know when that's going to come back to you.
Excellent. And do you recommend that people reach out via email, phone? What's best?
You know what? I think look at the communication style of the person you're communicating with. I have definitely people in my network that I know are always going to be best if we chat on the phone. Whereas if someone was reaching out to me for that, I'd be like, oh, please don't call me. please just send me an email, because I process information that way. So, knowing who you're asking and their preferences and playing to those, you might have a really tight relationship with someone where you're going to do it in a text or a Facebook message. It's going to be different for everyone.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's really important. Reaching out to them based on their communication preference, not yours. Because I think a lot of people are terrified of picking up the phone and actually phoning someone to ask for help. But if that's the best way for you to make the connection with someone else and get the point across to someone else, then you might be missing out by sending them an email instead of actually calling.
Yeah. And it's that whole, mindset thing where you have to just push yourself a little bit out of that comfort zone. That's where the magic happens.
Exactly. So what kind of mindset do you think people need to be in order to get to reach out and make the most effective communications to get referrals?
I think we need to look at it from the perspective of the person we're asking and really being of service. We want this to be, I always say to our students when we're talking about this, like, let's make this a win-win. So it's not about them giving you something. It's you have already providing so much value that this is a no-brainer. So this is why you're not going to go in cold. If it might take 3 months of you being in contact with someone before you get to a point where this doesn't feel like you're unbalanced. I mean, you really want to think about the idea of reciprocity and how you can be of service to people. And then from there, be okay with asking. So getting in a mindset of serving first with expecting nothing in return, I think is really, really important as a business owner.
I think that's really important as well. Now, you mentioned that you might have to be in touch with someone for a couple of months before you actually make the ask. And a few minutes ago, you also mentioned it's important to keep your network warm over time. So how would you recommend that people keep their network warm?
Okay, so easiest way ever, just use a spreadsheet, use a notebook, use something. Like, keep a record of when you talk to people, set up reminders for yourself. We use a system called Contactually that literally shows up in my inbox and says, hey, Maggie, you need to reach out to so-and-so, because I need that reminder because, all of us, we're busy. We've got things going on. The other thing is too, to always be thinking about how can you go that extra mile? So do you know it's someone's birthday? Hey, thank you, social media. You can totally creep and find out everyone's birthday now. Send a birthday card, send holiday cards, go that little extra bit. And I always use the example of my friend Sue that I've been friends with for 25 years. That woman is a machine when it comes to staying in touch with all of her friends and family and past network. I mean, she is a master networker. And I always say to people, we all need to be like Sue. Sue never forgets a birthday. Sue always will send an email, check in with you if she hasn't heard from you for a while. So, be like Sue.
I like that. So in addition to kind of checking in, saying hi, telling people happy birthday, that kind of thing, what kinds of little things can we do to keep the network, keep the contact warm and stay in touch? Because I think sometimes it can feel really awkward to just send someone an email and be like, hey, how have you been doing? Long time no see. Bye.
Yeah, for sure.
That's kind of awkward. So what can people say to make that easier?
Okay, so some really specific ways to make this actionable. Number one, send them an idea. Say, hey, only if it is genuine, but hey, I was thinking about your business, or I was thinking about that thing you mentioned 2 months ago. Having ideas and being generous with them. I think a lot of times we think, well, people have to pay me for that. Think of it as that little sample. If you can, again, be helpful, it's really not going to take you that much effort. Yesterday, someone asked me something about proposals. I was like, oh, here's the outline we use for proposals. That's something people paid to learn. But you know what? I was like, that's a simple thing I can offer and actually be helpful. So finding ways to give out ideas, actually, answer questions. The other thing is too, finding articles that are relevant. If you see something that really makes you think of them, or even if it's honestly, funny cat video, if that's up their alley, totally okay.
Yeah.
And the other thing is just, I think, also being just a really good steward of your own referrals. And if you see opportunities to connect people or that you are, you're trying to stay in touch with people or keep warm, be a really, really good steward of those relationships to introduce people to make referrals. When you're making referrals, people will associate you with wanting to be referred. It's a natural human instinct. It's called reciprocity, and we're all hardwired to do nice things for those who do nice things for us.
I love that. So how can business owners set up a process or a system that keeps the referrals coming in? Because this all sounds like, if we're starting from scratch, it sounds like a lot of work, and where do do you start and how do you keep, like, how can you just automate this and kind of have a system to keep the referrals coming in?
So, okay, I love this question. Number one thing is make sure when you are offboarding clients, you are wrapping up with them, that you are asking as part of that offboarding process for referrals. Again, really simple language of things like, I loved working with you. I'm always looking for clients just like you, blah, 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 right? Like just really focus in on making that ask. So many times offboarding goes a little something like this. Mic drop, see ya.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you want to create a great experience, and you don't want to botch that opportunity to continue that relationship with them and have them be your super fan referring people to you. So that's honestly the easiest way. Make sure that you have literally a task or a process in place where you do that with every single client that's a fit. Now, if it's a nightmare client, feel free to skip it.
Yeah.
You don't want more people like that.
No.
The other thing is too, literally going back to setting up reminders, very consciously. This is something we do in our business. Once a quarter, we go through and we're like, okay, who have we talked to for a while? What old clients do we need to be in touch with? Like really being intentional. We literally have scripts that we can take and tweak depending on who on the team is going to use them. So, spend a little time up front to have some processes or systems, whether that's a reminder in your calendar or using something like Contextually or creating, a spreadsheet that at the first day of every quarter, you go in and look at that.
I love that. So tell us more about Contextually. You've mentioned that a couple times now.
Yeah, super fan right here. So it's essentially a CRM. There's lots of different CRMs out there. This one is really designed for, I would say, a service type business where you are working in a client facing model. So it lets you set reminders. It lets you bucket your types of contacts. So I have contacts like past clients, past collaborators, current collaborators. Like you're really able to set it up in a way so that you have a unique approach. You can set up templates, and it sends me an email every day, Monday to Friday, saying, "Hey, Maggie, this is who you need to be in touch with." You can also record your last contact. And if you're using Gmail, you can integrate Gmail in there. So I can look up a contact and literally be like, "Hey, what was my last communication with Holly?" Look that up, and I can see our email history right there attached to that contact.
I love that.
I love that too. Because I find some interesting things once I get someone into Contextually. I'm like, oh, totally forgot we had that conversation.
I love that. I love that. Is that something that's reasonably priced for the solopreneur, or is that kind of more for small or medium-sized businesses?
I want to say we're using a $59 a month version. I think there is a lower cost version. I think that's because we have multiple seats. Again, I always look at it as if you get one referral and one new client out of it every couple months, it's totally paid for itself.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I mean, for me, definitely, even if I got like a third of a new client, that would pay for it.
And I think this is the type of work that sometimes it feels like in the beginning, you're like, oh, is this really a great use of my time? I can guarantee you, like, this always pays off. It's a longer term build, but it will be worth it. And in terms of ROI and your time invested, it's always going to come back way stronger than other marketing things that are just not as direct, and they're just fluffier and less direct. They're more windy and nuanced. They require extreme patience.
All right. So I think that's a really great point that you just made, because I think for a lot of people listening to this, and they might think, oh my God, another thing I have to learn to do, another system I have to implement, another software thingy system I have to learn how to use. This is going to take me so much time. So how much time do you think you spend, or would you recommend a solopreneur spend on this type of communication of keeping the network warm and getting referrals through this way?
Ooh, okay, so I'm going to get a little fired up right here.
All right.
We as solopreneurs spend a lot of time on busy work. Busy work being glitzy marketing things, building, how many followers do I have on this? Or what fantastical new thing am I going to put on my website? That stuff is great. But if you don't have clients, none of that matters.
Yeah.
So if you're really struggling to figure out where am I going to fit this networking referral marketing into the mix, let something else slide for a little bit and work on this. Because if you need clients consistently, this is the most important thing, because nothing else is going to matter on your road to success if you don't have enough clients to get you where you want to go.
I love that. I love that. So how much time do you think people need to kind of fit into their calendar every week to do this work?
I mean, honestly, probably an hour or two at the most.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like, I don't think this needs to be, especially once you take some time up front and systematize it and get clear on, what you're asking and have some templates. And, honestly, the more you do this, the more comfortable you will get with it.
Exactly. I think that sounds like a big stretch outside of a lot of people's comfort zones at the beginning. But obviously, the more you do that, the easier it gets.
Yeah. And I was funny. I had this conversation with a client last week, and I was just like, you know what? It's like, how when you first started using WordPress, it was really stressful? I'm like, this is way easier to implement. The learning curve here, you already know how to use most things. So it's just a matter of getting your head wrapped around it and, having that chat with yourself to say, yeah, this is important and I am going to focus on this because I want clients to come to me in the most organic, natural way possible.
I love that. And I think that's really important. So you've mentioned email templates a couple of times. How many different email templates do you think we need to have set up? What are they for? Are they for different stages of the phases of connection? Tell us more.
To be honest, this is going to depend on if you're a strong written communicator or not. In our case, I'm a writer.
Yeah, exactly.
So, it's a lot simpler for me. So for someone like me who, is a strong written communicator, having one or two templates that I can just take and tweak are perfect. If you're the type of person who's going to, you struggle a little more with your written communication, I would bullet out, multiple different scenarios and kind of think them through so that when it comes time to do it, you don't have that resistance and say, oh, it's going to be too much work. If you have 5 or 6 templates, it's like one that's like sending something of value, another one that's making an introduction, another one that's giving a referral. Like, just have some of those standard things ready to go so that you can take them and customize them in each situation, and you don't have that extra hurdle to go over that gives you the out.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes absolute sense. Excellent. This sounds really, really exciting.
It is exciting. This is like, we actually did with a group of our students last week, we did an entire challenge around this. And what was so fascinating was seeing how fast people got momentum once they got going, like booking consults and, having new referrals come in, like just so many times we're waiting for clients to come to us, and like that little bit of positive motion the other way can really change the course of how things are going.
Yeah, I like it because this is a really easy step you can take. It's just sending out a few emails or making a few phone calls, which might be a bit more difficult for some people. But I get the feeling this can be really, really powerful once you create that system and kind of get into the swing of doing this on a regular basis.
Absolutely. And here's a little perspective I always love to share is my business partner and I, we have a fairly, healthy business, but on the high-end consulting side of our business, this is like where 80% of our clients still come from. And that's with a podcast, with a blog, with all the things. We have all the things, but old school is what really truly works for those higher value clients.
Oh, that's a really, really interesting point. And that makes absolute sense because obviously they come trusting you and wanting to kind of sign up at a higher package than, someone who just wants to test the waters.
Yeah. And the reality is if I'm running the type of business that those types of clients are running, they're running $500,000, $1 million plus businesses, they're not sitting around looking for blog posts on Pinterest. That's a very different customer who we serve in a different way. And those clients are very served by online marketing. But for consulting clients, they're typically not served by that type of marketing. So you've got to understand the behavior of your people. And if you want higher value clients and you want it to be an easier yes, working your referrals in your network is just a simpler path ahead.
So how long do you think it can take people or people can expect to see results from starting this process?
I feel like we should put a star on this. Results may vary.
Yeah, I know.
This is a lot, to be honest. This is going to depend a lot on the strength of your network and how good you've been to date at nurturing your own network. But definitely start with your existing clients. Yes. Now, one thing I will recommend let's say you have like 3 ongoing coaching clients or retainer clients or whatever the case is, you want to proceed with a little bit of caution because you don't want the message to be, I'm going to push to get so many clients that I'm going to be full and I'm going to get sloppy serving you. Yeah. So I like to use language like I've had a spot open up, or I've just concluded with a client and I would love another one. You always want to kind of take any of that fear, because there is a tendency sometimes with clients to want to just keep you to yourself. They're like, I just want to have her in my clutches forever. So you want to proceed with a little bit of caution. But, I think starting with your existing clients and then looking at your network, this could be something that could pay dividends in a day. It could be a couple months, depending. But I've never seen it not pay off.
Yeah.
And it's time well spent. It's like anything. It's not going to hurt you, and it's not going to cost you anything to get started.
Yeah, exactly. Unlike Facebook ads or other marketing things that generally have a cost.
Yeah, this is definitely a much lower risk investment.
I love it. I'm super excited about this, and I feel like I'm ready to kind of create a system of my own. And I really hope our listeners will also take the leap outside of the comfort zone, and or at least a couple of steps, and start implementing this, because I think this sounds really, really powerful. So Maggie, moving on, I want to ask you, do you have any women business mentors? Are there any women entrepreneurs who inspire you?
Oh my gosh, it's such a long list.
I know. Top 3, top 1 too.
So, I have had the privilege of working with Natalie McNeil from She Takes on the World for the last 2 years as my mentor and coach, and she has been instrumental in that. I also find a lot of women outside of kind of my industry really, really inspiring. I just heard a podcast interview with the first female NFL coach. I love hearing those stories about women who are breaking boundaries and doing non-traditional things. I am also really, really inspired by my peers. Like, I can think of several of my peers that I look at are just doing amazing things that are very small acts, but they make a big impact. So one of my absolute most adored people is my friend Jules Taggart, who is just blowing up the world one bit at a time. And I absolutely look up to her, and I'm privileged to call her my friend. And I'm normally not this sappy.
It's fun to talk about exciting people.
Well, just, people doing things a little bit differently. Jules is a writer and a communicator like I am, but she's very much focused on intersectional feminism. And I'm learning a ton from her as I figure out how to embrace more diversity in our business and, speak up for what's right in our business, and all those different things that are really, on my mind right now.
Excellent. So Maggie, how can our listeners or other women entrepreneurs work with you?
Oh, there's so many ways.
How can they get started?
Yeah, there's 2 primary ways. So we have a program called Double It, which is where we work with service-based business owners in 3-month chunks of time. And we will be opening that up in the new year. And we also work with more established business owners actually providing services. So, everything we talk about in our business, we actually do for clients as well, which keeps us fresh and on our toes because we're in the arena. So we do everything from email marketing to content marketing. We don't do traffic. That's the one thing we will not do, or Facebook ads. But we have a fairly robust service offering on that side.
Excellent. Great. So where can people find you online and learn more about you?
So we are at scoopindustries.com. And because you're a podcast listener, we do have a show for service-based business owners called the Inside Scoop Show.
Great. Tell us more about your podcast.
This is where we get all ranty and also very specific and actionable about, the business of working with clients. There's a lot of information out there if you want to build passive income and you want to work on the beach. And this is kind of our antidote to like, hey, here's what it's really like to work with clients. And today we're going to talk about the glamorous topic of things like your business budget, or what happens when a client conversation goes wrong. And we really, the idea of the inside scoop is we definitely are very honest about our struggles or our challenges, or like, what is the reality of working with clients? Because it's amazingly rewarding, but it's also incredibly challenging.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I absolutely loved the content. I think it's very exciting. I really hope our listeners will take the step and start taking some actions to get referrals. And I think your advice was very, very specific and actionable. And I think it's something we've got enough information that we can get started creating our own system. So thank you so much for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Holly.
Thank you. And thank you for listening. And remember to visit hollywharton.com/187 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Business Mindset Podcast with your host, Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollywharton.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to head over to iTunes and leave a quick review of this podcast. It just takes a minute. Thank you.